the things we have to talk about when we start talking about adaptation to exercise and what's going on with that is the idea of how the body uses energy. And then, really, after AMP2 and the stuff we talked about in there, we know that muscles require energy to contract as well as relax. So, because of that, we need to really discuss how the body uses this energy and how it can get more efficient, and in reality, where is it coming from. So we need to get into a little bit of bioenergetics. Again, with bioenergetics, we're not going to get real crazy into the Krebs cycle and everything that's going on with that, or the electron transport chain and everything that's going on with that. But what we do need to be aware of is what are the sources that the body is going to use to generate this energy, and under what circumstances they're going to tap into what energy system. So I'm going to see this ends up being a little bit of fun. So again, really, as soon as depolarization starts happening and we get that calcium being released, we know that that is going to free up the ability of that actin and myosin to interact with one another and require any of that contraction and that ratcheting of those myosin heads. We know that we are going to need ATP. Because of this, we really need to figure out under what circumstances which energy system is going to be used and how the body is going to do that. And as we get through this a little bit more, we're going to see how the body can actually get more efficient at this after there's been training. And that is one of the ways that the body is going to physiologically adapt to this particular stressor. So we know, like I said, you need those ATPs to reset those myosin heads to let that ratcheting motion continue to happen into the muscle to contract. And we also need ATP in order to have the muscle relax. So to have that calcium get pumped back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum to remove it from the cytoplasm so the muscle can go back into fully relax, we need ATP for that too. So again, where are we getting it from? Hence the question, where are we getting it from? So this shows you, and again, if you've had anatomy and physiology 1 and 2, a lot of times this is something you would have seen. We have a number of different systems. You have something that's called the phosphagen system, or the creatine phosphate system. What's going to happen on this one is, again, ATP is adenosine triphosphate. Removing that last phosphate and converting it to adenosine diphosphate releases energy when you break that bond. One of the ways to create more ATP is to have phosphates stored on something else that you can put back onto that ADP to create ATP. That is what the creatine phosphate system does. It is using, when you have plenty of oxygen and plenty of energy available, we convert some of this creatine into creatine phosphate, put these phosphates on it, and then we can use that to put those phosphates back onto ADP when we're doing some exercise. And again, what we're going to see in this one, it's happens pretty immediately when you start an exercise. The other thing is when you're doing something incredibly intense, this is going to be the system that can provide energy or ATP the quickest. The main thing on this is there's not a lot of it. So in terms of this, it's enough to last 5, 6, 7 seconds. And after that, it's going to be kind of running out after about 10 seconds. You can see as we go a little bit further along here, you're going to start getting what is glycolysis. So glycolysis is, again, using part of your normal cellular ATP metabolism, so the glycolysis pathway, but without using the Krebs cycle, TCA cycle, whatever you want to call it, and the electron transport chain. So we're not doing that oxidative phosphorylation, we're just doing the beginning part of that, which is, again, if you recall, without oxygen. So you're taking a glucose and converting that to generate just a couple of ATP per glucose instead of the more efficient with oxygen 36 ATP per glucose. What this can do is, the main thing though is that the body is capable of doing, their cells, are capable of doing this rather quickly. So again, it's a way to generate energy quickly. And again, a lot of times it's because either you're doing an incredibly intense activity or you're doing some type of, or you've just started an activity and your breathing rate and your cardiovascular system is not kind of came up to speed enough to get you to a steady state aerobic type of activity. So you can see intense activities, the the glycolysis will start kicking in on this one. And up to about 2 minutes, you're going to see that glycolytic system is going to be involved. 2 to 3 minutes, you can have this. Again, when we'll get into this a little bit more as we go through this, this is on an equilibrium somewhat, or it's on a spectrum, I guess is a better way to say it. Again, if you get up to this 3 minutes here, and with the intensity of activity not being super hard, you can be pretty much near 100% aerobic. Main thing is, though, is if you've been doing that activity, you could be doing it for 20-30 minutes. If you all of a sudden increase the intensity, you might pull in glycolysis, or if there's some creatine phosphate left, you might pull in some of that again. So again, it's a time. So usually when you start an activity, you'll do the phosphagen system first, then glycolysis, then the oxidative system. It also is with intensity. So you could be doing a steady state stuff for a while, or you've been just jogging nice and easy at, let's say, 9-minute pace, and all of a sudden you start sprinting. You're going to pull in glycolysis. You might pull back in the phosphagen system to provide some of that energy because you're doing it at a much more intense level. So I don't want anybody to get it in their head that it's only on these time frames or only the intensity. Again, it's on the spectrum where, again, when you need this energy at a quicker pace, these other faster acting systems will kick back in. So what we're going to see is we're going to walk through some of these and kind of talk a little bit about how it works. But one of the things I want to think about different sports. I grew up playing hockey. And now I'm a runner. And that's part of the reason I came up with this class is I love physiology. I like to geek out on training and other stuff like that and the physiology of it. And to me, this is one of the things I could actually take some of the stuff that I think is really neat and apply it to kind of a hobby. And along the way, really show you by doing endurance exercise, we can actually see this happen. So again, pick a sport. So if we picked hockey, where would it fit on this bioenergetic spectrum? Well, if you think about hockey, you jump off the bench, you're out there and they're doing like 30 to 45 second shifts. So hockey is generally considered to be a rather anaerobic type of sport. It's one of those you go out there and you hammer high intensity for a short period of time, go back and rest. So if you think about the bioenergetics on that one, it's going to be a lot more of the phosphagen and glycolysis. Then you go back, provide enough oxygen to restore those systems, and then your next shift out there, you tap into them again. If you've ever seen I played defense when I was playing competitively. And if you ever see it every once in a while, you'll see, like, if you're watching it professionally on TV, maybe watching the college team when it's actually going on here, if they get trapped in the defensive end, a lot of times you'll see that the team that's the opposing team, they'll switch players out and you'll see the people that have been trapped out on the ice for a while, it looks like they just can't keep up. And that's because they've tapped their energy system so hard that they can't provide the ATP at the same speed as the people that are out there, and because of that, they're lagging behind. So again, then any of these things are, how would you train for these certain things there? And that's where we get into what causes a certain energy system to be used. And again, as we talked about in the first little set of videos here, everything is specific. So if you're doing a sport like hockey, how are you going to train for that? Well, you're probably going to have them do quick burst activities, quick sprints. You're not going to have somebody skate a marathon in order to train for playing hockey because you're never on the ice that long. So again, pick a different sport. It's going to be a different idea on this one. So again, what we're talking about is the use of energy and how we're using that energy to do work. Again, bioenergetics is just the different body systems and how these actually work in order to provide that ATP. And again, this is really coming about as a part of a catabolic action. We're taking glucose or other nutrient sources, things like glycogen, fat, and breaking that down to provide energy. So we're breaking those bonds to use that energy to create ATP, or to at least put phosphates onto ADP to generate the ATP. But also anything else we build, protein synthesis, other things like that, it is requiring ATP to do that as well. So we can talk about energy releasing actions, those reactions, those exergonic reactions that are usually catabolic, that provide that energy that we can store in ATP. We can talk about how protein synthesis is an endergonic reaction, it requires that, or different movements like how the actin and myosin interact, that is going to be an endergonic reaction is going to consume energy in order to make that happen. And if we really talk about all these in combination, that is metabolism. So, I mean, again, should be just some terms that you've heard before a number of times. And again, what we're doing now is going to start applying these to the body and exercise. So we'll work through the bioenergetics here. And then one of the things we're first going to start talking about is just the effect of exercise on the body in the short term. What happens to the heart? What happens to the muscles? And then we'll talk about if we train for it, what are going to be the longer term changes that happen that make the body more efficient at it. So again, ATP, it is generally not the only body energy storage thing here, but it's the most widely used. Adenosine triphosphate is an RNA base with 3 phosphates attached. Again, we're generally breaking off those phosphate bonds, usually just the one, to convert it to ADP or adenosine diphosphate, and a phosphate that's released, and that releases some energy. You can take it off the second phosphate and convert it to AMP, adenosine monophosphate. It's going to release some more energy, but again, not a huge deal on that one. But this is our body's pretty much energy currency. So again, the energy systems that we're going to be worrying about are really the phosphagen system. And where does this happen in the cell? It's just happening in that cytosol, in the muscle cell, the sarcoplasm, if we're worrying about muscle cells, but happening in the cytoplasm of cells, sarcoplasm of muscle cells, because we put sarco on the front of everything. Again, does not require oxygen. It's quick, but not efficient. Glycolytic, again, still taking place in that cytosol, the muscle cell, the sarcoplasm. Again, not using oxygen. It's not quite as quick. Still not particularly efficient, but again, that in the phosphagen system can provide ATP quickly. Oxidative system, this is going to require the mitochondria of your cells. Requires oxygen. We're going to need sufficient oxygen for this to happen. And again, at any time, and again, this is why I say it's on a spectrum, anytime the body can't provide sufficient oxygen to generate enough ATP, we're going to have to go back to the glycolytic. We're going to have to go back to the phosphagen system to have them chip in some of that ATP if we're trying to do something at a level of activity that the aerobic or oxidative system can't support. And again, just kind of talks about all the stuff again here. Phosphagen system, again, anaerobic, without oxygen, glycolytic, fast as well as slow. Glycogen here is using either sugar, carbs, glycogen to really deliver some ATP. The oxidative system, much more efficient, provides a lot more ATP, using either fat or carbohydrates as a way to provide this. And again, I don't want you to think it's one, then the next, and no phosphagen is being used while the oxidative system is being used. They're all being used at a given time. It's just how much or how little is dependent upon how long the activity is going and how intense the activity is. Generally, the longer it goes, the more we have to depend on the oxidative system. The more intense it is, the more we have to depend on these glycolytic and phosphagen pathways. And again, all of them are active. Some of them might be providing the main amount. Some of them might be chipping in a little bit extra. So that's where it's talking about their primary or secondary ones here. Again, depending on time and intensity. So what we'll talk about next is all the different types of these. We'll start working through the phosphagen system and when it's active. We'll start working through the glycolytic system and when it's active. Oxidative system when it's active. So I'll see you next time.